Hello, this is Mike from Dimensional Walking, and today I want to talk about something I haven't talked about in a long time. It's cattle mutilations. Okay. So, over the years, these events have happened basically all over the world, and probably in the United States, at least in my research shows it probably about 15 states. Okay. And also, it's also in Canada, also in Mexico. I found some cases. And besides cattle, there's been a few horses and there's been goats. Okay. And there could have been other smaller creatures. But of course, then we get into the whole world of chupacabras and all that stuff in Puerto Rico and Mexico and southern Texas, I guess. So that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about cat mutilations. Um, so I had a friend back in New Mexico. His name was Edwin, and he one time, well, he's probably spoke a couple times, but he at least one time that I can remember at my UFO forum, New Mexico UFO Paranormal Forum in Albuquerque. He spoke about his cattle mutilation experience, his own personal family cattle mutilations. Um, so he was very emotional about it. It was a very trying time for him and his family, because they lost, I believe, about 40 head of cattle, and I think they also lost a horse also to a mutilation. Um, so again, it was a very personal, very emotional type conversation he had with our group, and it was quite amazing. The Really the high quality of information and the high quality. He had some really wonderful photos. I'm sorry I can't share those with you because I don't have them, but he shared them with us at that time. And anyways, he also, again, with the cattle mutilation thing, of course, there's a lot of conspiracy theories, and I don't know how many of them are absolutely true or how many are not true. But this is kind of a mixed bag here. There was some talk about UFOs in this. There's talk about Dulce because this takes place in Dulce, New Mexico area. Um, so there's the underground base, maybe involvement here, UFOs involvement here. Like I say, government agencies involved here. So it's a whole bunch of stuff going on at once. Okay. So, anyways, one of the other things Edwin, and I'll talk to you at the very end, talks about is that he was, sometime in the future, anyways, he was planning on maybe doing a book on UFOs and all the conspiracy things surrounding the cattle mutilations and his own personal experience. So I'm looking forward to reading that book sometime in the future. Don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm sure if he said it was, it will. So during the late 70s and 80s, him and his family, as I said, lost about 40 head of cattle. And there was also this evidence around these cattle that there was these three pod landing vehicles. You could see the markings right into the ground. Again, around the mutilated cattle. So anyways, watching how long the bad effects would last in the animal population. Uh, Ed's one of the other things that happened was a lot of 23 of his cattle, it seemed like they were killed by a mysterious bacterium. And he kind of thought, well, maybe it was a bioweapon. It could have been. We don't really know. And then he also witnessed a UFO fly over uh, some of his cattle. Uh, these 23 cattle we're talking about now, and all of them were dead within 24 to 36 hours. Okay. So that was really dramatic, I guess it would be. He said during the same period of time in the area, in the Dulce area, they determined, I guess because there was some other studies done, that there was a 40% reduction in the births of things like deer, elk, cattle, and even people. To some extent, there was a reduction there was numerous miscarriages also in the area. Nobody seems to know why it happened during this time frame, but maybe it had something to do with this what he calls maybe a bioweapon type situation. Um, so, and then I guess what happened was since he was not the only family in the area that was having this issue, uh, then there was, of course, some of these stories about the UFOs. And as soon as the media caught hold of that, it seemed like the whole credibility of what was going on with the cattle mutilations kind of went out the window because there was a lot of reports in the newspapers at that time about these cattle mutilations. And of course, again, remember the cattle mutilations were happening all over the United States. And it's still, you still get reports of them. We get reports out here, I think it was just last year. There was a cluster of them in eastern part of Oregon. So they still go on. Now in the 70s and 80s, it seems like there was a lot of them going on. Okay, and especially at this point in that Dulce, northern New Mexico area. In this case, Dulce is in like northwestern part of the state, but even in the eastern northern part of New Mexico, I had seen some reports at just about at the same time. So so Edwin contributed, of course, some of this to some black unknown government agency. Uh, and what disturbed him the most was, or one of the things that disturbed him most, was that not only whoever was doing this was killing these animals, and even taking them up with them. There was also the thing about black helicopters and UFOs, and they were like sucking the cattle up. And of course, what really made him extremely angry was the fact that many times the carcasses, after they were, whatever they wanted taken out, whoever these people were or aliens were, they would drop the carcasses back on his property, and that was just he felt that was intentional harassment, maybe to keep quiet, or he wasn't really sure what the deal was. Um, so anyways, let me catch the rest of this here. Sorry, I got my pages a little mixed up here. So let's go back to the cattle mutilations himself. Now, these all of Edwin's cattle mutilations were the typical. Uh, we call them rectal coring, which is kind of gross. With the removal of the lips and the tongue. And of course, I did mention that Edwin had this rare event, we'll call it the horse mutilation. The value of all this that he lost was close to $100,000. I guess what happens, if I remember the rest of the story, the insurance did pay for some of this issue, but after a while, I think he said they stopped. They said that was it. They could only continue this, and of course, the government ends up paying for this, which is all of us. As far as through government agencies or something, some agricultural loss type thing, or cattle loss, uh, that there was some insurance for that. Um, so one of the interesting notes were that he told us about was the mutilated cattle were marked with some type of invisible fluorescent paint. And he thought it was some type of marking system. And I think what they were saying is that the cattle were marked, and then days later, these particular cattle that were marked were taken, and then they were taken either up in some kind of a craft, and then they were dropped back down, and then you know they would tell, apparently using a black light, I guess you can go ahead and tell what the markings were. And I'm not sure, he probably told us what the markings looked like, but anyways, they were marked in some form. um so there was always a question of why was these membrane type tissues taken. Okay. And Edwin answer was this is what his feelings were. Now, there's the UFO theory, of course, that I'd heard many times before, that the tissues were taken because some kind of a thing was made for the feeding of the grays. Okay, which maybe makes sense. I don't know. Anyways, this was done. The grays, if you know anything about the grays, uh, they're fed through their skin, or at least that's what I've heard. Pretty gross. They put whatever it is on their skin and it's absorbed through their skin. Okay. Yeah. I know that's just pretty much a theory. But, anyways, that's a one theory of what these membranes were used for. The second theory was, and this is what Edwin's theory was, is that this area, something had happened in this area. Now, there is a story of this underground nuclear test. Well, it wasn't even a test, it was actually an underground nuclear explosion was used to frack gas underneath northwestern part of New Mexico. And so what he's saying is they were checking to see possibly what the effects were on maybe people and what the effects were on the regional animals because of this test, or maybe it was bioweapons they were checking. But apparently, his theory is that uh, checking these types of the lips and the rectum and the gut areas of the animals for any radiation or chemicals, this is a place to check because this is where these types of material, these types of things, these markers would be in those areas. So that was kind of his theory. It very well could be true. I don't know. But again, we got UFO type things going on here. We got government agency type things there too. So, anyways, and it was kind of interesting that Edwin talked about calling these people terrorists, which they could be people, aliens, whatever it was, because that what they were doing up there previous and what they were doing, in the 70s and 80s, etc. So, anyways, hopefully, I guess when I want to end this is, hopefully someday Edwin will go ahead and write his book, and it's going to encompass UFOs. It's going to encompass these possible agencies. It's probably will encompass that explosion, that nuclear explosion I was talking about underground. It's going to encompass a lot of stuff. And it's gonna, I would guess, it's gonna kind of blow the roof off of the whole subject matter in the future. Um, Anyways, that's really all I have to say about that. And I think it's an interesting subject. I think it's highly controversial, but I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So, with that said, happy trails until we meet again. Bye bye.